Olá! Boa noite, já é boa noite, dá para dar as boas noites aqui para mais um episódio do Mesa de Produto. E mais uma vez estamos fazendo essa introdução aqui ao vivo com vocês que estão aí assistindo. Qual a ideia dessa introdução? É a gente conseguir, antes de começar o episódio gravado, bater um papinho rápido com quem está aqui com a gente. Uma coisa que eu gostei muito desse episódio é justamente o fato da gente ter conversado com alguém que está construindo a ferramenta, né? Uma das ferramentas que são mais utilizadas no mundo de gestão de produto, e agora o Mixpanel até tem uma parte de gestão de marketing, né? De métricas de marketing. E foi muito legal conversar com uma pessoa que está ali. Inclusive a Laura, que é a nossa convidada desse episódio, ela trabalha no Mixpanel há muitos anos, então ela já vivenciou muitas coisas ali, desde a pegada de PLG, até mesmo como construir interfaces que são facilmente entendíveis por pessoas globalmente, né? Porque o Mixpanel atende o mundo inteiro e é o mesmo produto para o mundo inteiro. Então ela tem todas essas complexidades e vai até o ponto de eles usam o Mixpanel para medir o Mixpanel, né? Como as pessoas estão usando. Então é um papo muito legal. Inclusive nessa conversa eu estava com o Lucas Bacic, que é CPO da loja integrada, e também com o Raphael Farinazzo, que já esteve aqui em outras mesas de produto com a gente e que agora está atuando na PM3 também como CEO, começou oficialmente hoje, inclusive o Farina. Então eu estou super animado para ter o feedback de vocês sobre esse episódio. É um episódio que a gente gravou com a Laura presencialmente lá no Product Camp, porque ela foi uma das keynotes do Product Camp, e a gente teve a oportunidade de gravar com ela ali e aproveitar todo esse papo. Eu queria também agradecer o Bacic, que topou de última hora entrar ali e agregou muito nessa conversa. Nesse papo, a gente vai, obviamente, se aprofundar em dados, estratégia de produto e também conversar sobre desenvolvimento de produto e como a gente consegue melhores práticas disso, desafios que existem, enfim, e principalmente no caso do Mixpanel, que tem também que lidar com uma questão de LGPD, né? Lá fora é outra lei, é a GDPR, mas que seria equivalente à LGPD aqui no Brasil. O Mixpanel tem que lidar com isso de uma maneira muito mais, não sei se muito mais, como é que eu posso dizer aqui, fugiu a palavra, mas você entendeu. Você tem que lidar de um jeito mais pesado, porque são dados de empresas globais e muitas vezes enormes que estão disponíveis ali. Enfim. Olha aí, tem o Marcelo da Costa aí, show de show. Marcelo, espero que você goste desse episódio. Ficou bem legal. E tem vários outros aí do Mesa que já gravamos e vai sair em breve. Então eu queria chamar aqui a produção. Pessoal da produção, pode rodar esse episódio. E quem está assistindo aqui com a gente, vai comentando, deixa os comentários, dá o like nesse vídeo. E se você tiver eventualmente ali no Spotify, quando sair lá no Spotify, dá aquelas 5 estrelinhas pra gente, que ajuda a divulgar o podcast. Dá mó trabalho conseguir gravar, dá muito trabalho conseguir todos esses convidados. Então, conto com a ajuda de vocês. Espero que vocês gostem. E outra, sugere pauta pra gente. Se você quer ver a gente conversando sobre alguma coisa, sugere uma pauta, sugere um convidado. A gente pode ir atrás dessas pessoas e conseguir gravar um mesa super completo que talvez ajude você na sua carreira também. Tá bom? Bom, espero que você goste e vamos rodar o episódio agora. Olá, seja bem-vindo ou bem-vinda a mais um episódio do Mesa de Produto, e dessa vez é uma edição especial que a gente costuma fazer no Product Camp, que acontece no final do ano. Nessa edição, a gente vai conversar sobre dados, estratégia de produto e Product Analytics. E a gente está aqui com 3 pessoas. Mas uma delas é a nossa keynote internacional, Laura Krieger, Senior PM do Mixpanel, e a gente vai ter que conversar em inglês. Mas não se preocupe, que esse episódio vai ter legenda e você vai poder acompanhar com legenda também, se você estiver assistindo no YouTube. Bom, vamos mudar para inglês agora, então acompanhe a gente, vou fazer o melhor possível aqui com o meu inglês. So, okay, let's start now in English. So, I will present.
Fine.
Okay,
Yeah.
you worked there for 6 years, right?
Yeah.
Good stories to share.
Yeah, it's been a journey.
Yeah, amazing. You also have here Raphael Farinazzo. He's not like, I don't know how many times we've been here, so it's a great pleasure again.
I practically live here.
Yeah. Yeah. And also for the first time, Lucas Bacic,
CPO at Loja Integrada, right?
That's it. That's it. Just joined, just switched the gears to Loja Integrada. Great to be here.
Awesome. So Laura, I want to start with a question about Mixpanel itself. Mixpanel for a long time focused on product analytics and keep focusing on that.
Mhm.
And how do you guys make sure that we have more advanced analytics about product, and at the same time, those analytics can be easy to understand, and how you guys keep sure of that?
Yeah, for sure. So continuing to go deeper in product analytics is a key focus of ours. We want to keep being able to answer more and more questions. We sort of think of like the spectrum of questions. You're probably never going to get to 100% of every question being answered within the product. I think that's when you're going to need like a data team and, real sophisticated people for certain types of questions. But we want to keep pushing the boundary of what's possible to do in a very self-serve, easy fashion. And we ourselves have a very long list of things that we use Mixpanel a lot. I think dog fooding is really important for product development. And so as PMs, we have our own wish list of things that we want to be able to answer and additional depth that we're pushing for in the product. I'm always haranguing the team that works on certain things. I want to be able to do this. Or okay, yeah, you've given me the average, but I want the median, or things like that. So I think, as dog fooding is incredibly powerful, and that's one way that we continue to push deeper on the analytical power, and then also talking with our customers and keeping track of what are the questions and always just making sure that they can answer more and more questions. So continuing to go deeper is a key focus for us. But as you mentioned, that we don't want to do that at the expense of creating a really chaotic or cluttered user experience. And one of our key metrics is not only the number of questions that you can answer and the depth of analysis, but also the time that it takes a new user to save their first. Yeah, exactly. It's like that first aha moment. And we want to keep improving that. So we're trying to go in two directions that sometimes can feel divergent, or they're pulling you in different directions. And I think that's where we lean on our incredibly talented design team. I love the designers I work with. I just feel so lucky to be in their presence. And I think we spend a lot of time thinking really deeply about the design, because ultimately excellent design is what allows you to beat that trade-off and to create an experience where for a new user coming in, it seems pretty simple. And then as you become more sophisticated and as your questions keep building, that then you can the product naturally unfolds. Because any good question, you're always going to have another question, right? There's that follow-up question and then the follow-up question. And designing the product in such a way that we don't put all of that in front of you at the very first moment, but rather where it's a more natural evolution. And that's really our design team is leading the charge there.
You talked about the aha moments, but you guys are really big. You are around the globe. How you keep sure that you have different aha moments for different types of users? Because probably you have different aha moments, right?
Actually, so our aha moment is global, and it's across all customer types, and it's across all segments. And I actually think that that's really powerful because it puts pressure on us to design the best experience. I think if you start designing one experience for this persona and a different experience for that persona, and okay, but what about in this region and that region, you can end up with a very disconnected and disjointed user experience. And again, coming back to sort of we have an excellent design team, but we also really push them of okay, we've got all these different things we want to do, but we need to do that in a single version. And really trying to make sure that as we expand the types of users that we sell to and that we serve, that we're able to do that in a way that is consistent and doesn't come at the expense of our existing users. So historically, Mixpanel has been very much focused on product managers, or kind of the trio of product engineering and design. Over the last 6 months, really, I think after kind of some of the changes with Google Analytics, we've seen tremendous adoption from marketing and kind of growth marketing personas. And that, I think, has been one challenge for us of how do we expand the number of personas that we're talking to and covering and addressing, but doing that in a way that doesn't create a poor user experience for our core, original users. So like, how can we, I don't know, invite more people to the dinner table without knocking over the wine glass? I don't know. What's the metaphor there? But yeah.
I have a question about that. Of course, you said you use your own product, and I'm pretty sure you have standard event names and you have all the events at the right places.
There's a saying, at least in English, that the cobbler's son has no shoes.
Yeah.
Our projects are not perfect, and because we use Mixpanel so heavily, like it can be a kind of chaotic. So we also feel the pain of our customers that, like, when things get messy, because we're there too. So anyway, saying that just to say that we're not perfect.
Good. I figured it wouldn't be that perfect, but we've all worked in companies where the event names are not standardized. We don't have events for a lot of things. And when you say, well, our key metric is how many questions are you able to answer and the time it takes for you to answer a given question. But of course, it depends on how mature the product analytics team, the product team is in terms of analytics and data. And I'm pretty sure it messes a little bit with your metrics. How do you balance that? And how do you see this whole layer of analytics education that you somehow have to provide? And it's outside the product, but your metric depends on that layer too, right?
100%. And so, yes. And I will say that the benefit of traveling and actually talking with our customers in their home states and connecting with them there is getting a better feel for like different markets and kind of what levels of sophistication are about product analytics in those markets and kind of what's top of mind. And over the last, I would say 12 to 18 months, we really have realized how important product education is. And I think that's come as we've become more international and not necessarily everyone is like a PM at Uber. Though, frankly, even large companies, not everyone has it figured out. So yes to product education. And I think what we're doing about it, I think the first thing I would say is like doing the unsexy things, that working on docs. I don't think many PMs get really excited about working on docs. At least me personally, I'm always like, oh, okay. But we know that that's really important. And that's been an area that we've invested in. And it's not the snazziest thing. It's not like a really hard engineering challenge, but realizing how important that is to a good user's experience. But then also doing things within the product as well. So one of the things that we've launched is templates. And the starting point from that was talking with, startup founders at YC or other kind of prominent accelerators. And it's like, you think they would have it all figured out, but a lot of them would land in the product and they're like, well, I don't actually know like what metrics I should care about. Like,
I know I should look at data, but
exactly.
What should I see here?
Got it engineered, got the data connected, and then they land in the product and they're like, so now what? And that story and hearing that from our customers was really the inspiration for launching templates. And so we started off with our very first template is just looking at what are the key KPIs for any company, B2C, B2B, whatever your company is. There's certain things that everybody needs to care about. You need to care about engagement. Are users getting to that value moment? You need to care about retention. Are users coming back? And you need to care about growth. Are you attracting more and more users? And are you able to do that without tanking engagement and retention? And so that was our first template, and we've continued to build them from there. And we're using that as one way to help educate customers on product analytics, and doing that in conjunction with doing kind of the less sexy things around documentation and writing blog posts and creating content.
Amazing. In your keynote, you mentioned all the journey of discovering what is the aha moment. You mentioned a lot of experiments. I have the great content. I have a few questions on that. The first one is, how do you tackle those experiments, understanding that you have both SMB and enterprise customers? How do you vary those experiments based on those different type of customers?
Yeah, I would say the interesting thing is that those users aren't necessarily as different as you would think they are. I think one is just that a lot of times your PM that's working at an enterprise company, maybe they get an idea for something they want to do. And so they start their own startup, and then, they hire a couple of their friends. And then maybe the startup gets bought, or, unfortunately it goes bankrupt. Like, that's not every startup successful.
Yep.
And then a lot of those PMs end up back in an enterprise company. So I think that's the first thing, is that the persona a lot of times actually is more fluid than it might show up necessarily in our business metrics. And then the other thing is that not even PMs at big enterprise companies, not all of them have the same level of comfort with data. And so I actually think that's a bigger differentiator, is what is your experience with product analytics? What is your history, experience, comfort level, more so than company size? And so that's been, when we're thinking about the onboarding experience for new users, that's been something that we're trying to identify. And we're actually launching a new onboarding flow, hopefully soon, if my engineers are listening to this podcast, God willing. And one of our goals there is, with this new onboarding flow, to meet different users at different points in their journey. If you're really sophisticated, you can just close out of it. If you're like, okay, I kind of get it, but I want a little help, then you can go through the steps. If you're like, I have no idea, then there's a welcome step that really talks from the very basics, and you can go watch those videos and listen to that content. And so trying to design an experience that meets users at different points in their journey and in their evolution, and that evolution is not tied to a specific segment. It's actually quite agnostic.
And since you talked about onboarding new users, which tips you usually do, or Mixpanel usually gives when a company wants to use advanced analytics, especially product analytics, and use it as a strategy for them? What tips you guys usually do? Let's say they don't have a product analytics yet, so they want to, and how they should start to use it.
Yeah, so I think we always recommend just starting small, that it doesn't need to be a huge investment. Just get started. Something is better than nothing. And you can get a tremendous amount of value out of very few events. Our company KPI template, the one I was talking about that covers engagement, retention, and growth, you can generate that entire report with just 2 events. Like your first kind of identifying of the user, whether it's a sign up, login, or something like that. And then the value moment is whatever you're driving to. And that value moment can evolve as you learn more about your customers. You'll get smarter, and maybe that definition will shift. But I think it's important to just get started. Start with some hypothesis. We think our value moment is X. I don't know, the first time you call a car if you're Uber, or the first time that you order groceries, or whatever that value moment is, starting off with some hypothesis about, which hopefully every PM can do, right? Like, what's your product doing? What's the goal of all of this? What's the problem you're trying to solve? And starting very small with just those 2 events, and then start building from there. And I think there can be this temptation to like track everything, but I think actually your product analytics practice is more successful if you start with, what are the business goals? What's the experience that we want to create for our users, and what's the outcomes we want to drive for our company, and focusing on the experience and the outcomes, and then working backwards to what events you should track. And really, if you start small, it doesn't need to be a big investment. You can implement Mixpanel in an hour or 2, and then start to see value, and then slowly evolve over time.
Let's think of this company, this PM, they cross the bridge. They are in the other side of the bridge now. They have some data structure, and as you mentioned in your keynote, you want them to use data to inform their decisions, their prioritization, and so on. Tell me the other side of the coin, examples of people making bad decisions because they don't know how to look at data.
All right, so ways in which avoiding data can lead you astray. I think sometimes there's an over-reliance on intuition, and I think that can be particularly strong in startups where there's like a very strong founder, and a lot of times your intuition has gotten you to where you are, but your intuition won't always get you to the next level. And I think some of that as well is when you're a founder, and a lot of times the problem is very close to your heart, and it's something that you feel very much, very deeply. But as your user base expands, the next users might be coming with a slightly different pain point. And so I think if you're purely going off of your intuition, that sometimes you can miss those shifts in your customer base. And so I think it's important to pair both of those, both the intuition and the judgment that you have. Like, we're not robots. It's in being a good PM, like you need to have product sense and you need to have a strong intuition. But if you do that without any data and kind of operate blindly, then you can really miss the signals that you're getting from either your users or from the market. And to just give a more concrete example of where where my intuition has sometimes been wrong, I think we designed this new invite flow. I talked about that in the presentation, and it seemed like a total no-brainer, right? Like, the old invite experience had like 5 different things you needed to fill out. And it's like, can we get that to 3? Can we get that to 2? Can we get that to 1? Like, how simple can we make this experience? And just continuing to push for greater simplicity. And I thought it was a no-brainer. I was like, this is so much better. And honestly, like, part of the reason we ran the A/B experiments, I was like, this is going to be a nice little line. I'm going to put it in my like review, like, lifted the invitation completion rates by 50%. Turns out that wasn't what happened. The data actually said something different. And I don't think my intuition was wrong. I think we are right in continuing to go down the path of simplicity, but that the solution wasn't the best solution. And so we went back, tweaked our designs, and are actually currently awaiting the results. But I'm really hoping this time around we've nailed it and have actually improved the user experience.
Yeah, I was working for this company, and we were reporting like every week in our all hands meeting a very high conversion rate, and we were all celebrating the conversion rates were always high, and we were very happy. And our support team was complaining that people were unable to convert; they were having a bad time converting. And then we kept saying, well, sorry, that's not what data is showing us. Conversion rates are at all-time high. And then a single filter, when we decided to look at first-time conversion, it was near 0. And then we figured, oh, yeah, first-time conversion. Yeah, thanks for telling us. And then, of course, we were relying on data, but we were not asking the right questions. Mm-hmm. And somehow, there was a confirmation bias because we were all so happy to look at high conversion rates, and it was a little bit, we didn't want to experience the pain of having to dig deeper and to find out that we were wrong, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes you have this, like, you don't want to be wrong. And you know that if you dig a little bit deeper into data, you might be wrong.
Yeah, I think that also underscores the importance of just like the cross-functional collaboration. And I also really love our support team. I love everyone I work with, but I think we have a really world-class support team, and they help us build a better product, and making sure that you're including all of those voices in the product development process, and that you're not working in a silo where you're like, well, here's what my data says. I think opening up the room and inviting more people to the table is another good way of fighting that confirmation bias.
Since you mentioned, how do you see other areas beside products using Mixpanel? Is it common? Do you somehow tell them to use them? You see companies the more mature companies, I guess, like you have users for customer support,
Mhm.
accessing Mixpanel and answering questions. How do you
Yeah,
say-
well, so the first thing I'd say is that in order to work at Mixpanel, some interest in data is like kind of like that's a baseline, right? Everybody who works at Mixpanel has some interest and curiosity about data. So I think there's a natural inclination there, but I think really every department uses Mixpanel. Obviously our product department, our design department, like design, product, and engineering are in there a lot. But we also like outside of the core kind of product engineering, there's also like our infrastructure engineering. They use Mixpanel in order to monitor some of our costs. We have the data flowing from GCP into our Mixpanel project, and we have alerting of like, when something is looking problematic, we get an alert, and then we can start proactively addressing that. And so I think outside of product engineering, I think there's other engineering teams that use Mixpanel. But then going even further afield, our support team uses Mixpanel to analyze trends in their ticket data. They load their ticket data into Mixpanel, and so they can see, oh, there's been an increase in pricing tickets, and that's probably related to the changes we made to our pricing page. And so our support team can then look at the support tickets and come to me or the folks on my team that work on monetization and be like, okay, we've got a problem. This is something you guys should be aware of. They also that's sort of using Mixpanels to analyze the tickets, but they also will go into Mixpanel, and if somebody writes in a ticket, they'll look and see what did the user do before that. How did they end up in this state where maybe a report was broken or something went wrong? So they use kind of our data about our users to debug things and help get users on a successful path. Obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but so we've got our support team is using it. Our success team also uses it. We talked about growing the number of weekly active users as being really important for driving account growth and increasing our upsell rate. That was something from the talk that I just gave. And so we're very closely monitoring the number of weekly active users per account. And it's actually something that's like part of the evaluation process for our success team is how much they're able to drive engagement within the accounts that they own. And so they're also very active in Mixpanel and understanding like who are the most active users, who are the champions, how can I reach out to them and help them amplify their voice, whatever they're doing, help more people at the company be like that. Or conversely, who are the users that log into Mixpanel and then never come back again? And then our success team can reach out to them and be like, hey, saw you got started. And then, I don't know, like, can I help? Like, what happened? What's missing? And give those users a little extra support. So kind of our support team is very closely looking at product usage and also segmenting, even within an account, who are the power users, who are the champions, who are the struggling users, and then running different outreach sequences on each of those cohorts of users.
And Laura, you talked about activation. How do you guys define who is an active user? It's like making a query once a month. What's an active user for Mixpanel?
Yeah, so when we talk about weekly active users, that's just simply like a user that's been active on the platform. So that's kind of just like, are they logging in? Are they seeing something in the product? And we also look at kind of other versions of that where there's a higher threshold of like, the number of learning users and things like that. But Mixpanel is both a platform that allows sort of ad hoc analysis and your own exploration, as well as monitoring and reporting. So not everyone's going to be somebody that's creating a lot of content. Some people are going to be more consumers of content. Maybe they log in, they look at the dashboard. Like, particularly, for example, like an executive. A lot of times an executive will log in, they'll be like, okay, seeing how these metrics are doing. They might not be building a lot of their own queries. They have questions. They might ask somebody else to do that for them. But that's still an important user for us. And so that's why we focus on just top level weekly active users. And then we do some deeper cuts below that. But top level goal is just weekly active users.
You just gave the example of a team doing an experiment with pricing and then this messing up with other data in your whole activation pipeline. How do you handle this? Different teams within the company running different experiments that may impact the same metrics. How do you handle the governance, the analysis of such things?
Yeah, I would say that that is an area that we are learning. Also that we are a B2B company. So our experimentation platforms are far less robust than what you would see at a B2C company. And so a lot of our customers that use Mixpanel and do have really heavy experimentation, they'll often use one of our partners that can make sure that that process is a lot smoother. But for us, it's really, we're a relatively small product team, just us as PMs talking to each other and making sure that kind of we're keeping things clean. I wouldn't say we're like world class at that. I think we partner with some companies that are really world class. And so that's, I think, probably what I would recommend for people that are interested in going deeper on experimentation.
So it's really common when, let's say, a junior folk is starting to look at data to open the data and look at every day, but most of the data, you need some time to take good insights out of it. How do you manage this within your team, and what is your advice for other companies starting to look at data in a daily routine?
Yeah, so I think this is one area where how you use data and how you bring that into your daily rituals is going to be dependent on your company size. I think it's good to be looking at the data every day. I think it's good to be aware, and you'd rather, if something goes wrong or if something goes really right, like you want to learn about that as quickly as possible. And so I think it's good to be looking at the data every day. You don't want to wait 2 weeks for something and then look at it and be like, oh, like positive or negative, that's 2 weeks that you've lost. And like time is of the essence. It doesn't matter how small, how large, like if you're a small company, like every time is of the essence. So I do think you should be looking at data every day. I think where the risk comes is from looking at experiments prematurely. And I think that's experimentation differs a lot depending on your company size. And so B2C companies just have so many more users, and it's so much easier to run experiments quickly and run multiple experiments at the same time. Mixpanel is a B2B company. And so when we're thinking about the experiments, thinking about if it's either our users or our account base, we just have much smaller sample sizes than you would see at a big consumer app. And so that makes experimentation a lot trickier, and it makes it slower. And I keep coming back to speed because I really do think like speed is so important. And so what that means is that we can't A/B test everything. And so we need to pick and choose our moments where we want to A/B test something. And we also need to think about other ways to gain confidence that might not be a traditional A/B test. So I think that's being in the B2B space, you have to be a little bit more creative about how you're measuring your outputs. Your outcomes. I think the temptation is to be focused on the outputs of like, here's the requests that we have from our biggest customers, and we're going to ship boom, 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 and just sort of take your customer feedback and turn that almost into like a ticketing system. And then you're just very much focused on what you're shipping and what the outputs are. But really, like, that's not the best way of doing product management. And you're not going to build the best product that way. So you really need to shift from thinking about the outputs to thinking about the outcomes. And if you're in a B2C company, those outcomes are often going to be based off of the experiments you run. In a B2B company, you have to get a little more creative, because I don't think anyone has the luxury of waiting around months every time they want to ship something.
Well, we are coming to the end, but I have one more question about product-led growth. Mixpanel probably has a lot of small customers and a lot of enterprise customers, right? How do you guys balance product-led growth, since you guys also have enterprise sales? And I think this is a question that our audience also have, because
Yeah.
they have some issues like this in Brazil. How you guys balance this?
Yeah, I would say it can be tricky. I think that there's always a little bit of tension there, and I'd be lying if I said otherwise. I think some of it is on kind of the sales strategy side and sales compensation and structuring that so that way alignment is, everyone's aligned on the same outcomes and driving towards the same goals. But thinking more specifically about product-led growth and how product can help our sales team, that I think is important to talk about how the two work together and feed off of each other. And so we have an online plan. It's very affordable. We have a free plan that's like awesome. And I think there can be a temptation or not a temptation, but just as a salesperson, it can be hard if you're like talking to somebody and then they sign up for the free plan or they sign up for our online plan or we've got an amazing startups program. And so like, they're like, oh, like instead of turning into this big account, they're on our startups program and they're getting Mixpanel for free for a year. Like, how am I going to meet my quota if they do this? And I think it's trying to shift the thinking around that, around having a longer time horizon. And we talk about being like long-term greedy versus short-term greedy. And then making that real and helping the sales team understand and like follow that user's journey, that whoever signs up for the free plan today or the growth plan today, if they are successful, they're going to grow. They're going to need the full capabilities of Mixpanel and like all of the things that our enterprise team or plan offers is eventually going to become necessary. And so sort of thinking of it as an investment now for the future. And what we as a product team can do, I mean, not just telling that story, but also helping connect the data with our sales team. So that way our sales team is getting fed like a drip of data about these are the accounts in the free plan that have like really quickly increasing data. Like, it's a way for them to identify like what apps are going viral or, getting a ton of downloads. And like, those are accounts that are probably going to turn into the next big thing. And so feeding that data back to our sales team so that way they can be smart about the accounts in our free plan, our growth plan, our startups plan, who are the ones that we should start building a relationship with. And then ultimately that leads to faster deal times, increased deal velocity, and helps the reps meet their quotas. And so it's, I think, A, shifting the narrative, and then B, giving them the data that they need to be successful. And so that way our sales team can identify and really understand that the free and the starter and the startup plan, all of that is sort of the breeding ground for the next generation of unicorns, and making it really easy for them to access that data and act on it.
Awesome. Guys, you have other questions?
All good.
All good.
I could spend hours talking.
Spend hours talking about
I
it.
still have a lot of questions, but we must end, right?
I think there's a beer garden later. I think that's so
Yeah.
you know where to find me.
Well, Laura, thank you very much. I hope to see not only you more times here at Product Camp, but also more about Mixpanel here, more people bringing data as a
You
topic.
better believe it. Yeah, I am sold on Brazil. I'm like, I'll come to any conference,
Awesome.
anywhere.
Awesome. Farinazzo, Bacic, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the invitation.
Pessoal, para você que ficou aí até o final, eu espero que você tenha gostado do episódio. Deixa um like aqui no YouTube, se você estiver no YouTube. Se você estiver no Spotify, dá aquelas estrelinhas, 5 estrelinhas pra gente. E compartilha com mais pessoas que possam se interessar por dados. Eu estou implementando o Mixpanel, implementando alguma ferramenta de dados também. Muito obrigado e até o próximo episódio.